to my Just Jenny podcast. Today's guest is the award-winning documentarian, journalist, speaker, author, philanthropist, horse rider, I should say equestrian, and mom Soledad O'Brien. We have talked before, but this is your first time on my podcast, so thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I was doing a little bit of research and I got to see, I guess, a bit of your new digs, but I'm not sure that they were the actual pictures of your.
Oh, the floor painting?
I don't even know what it
Yeah,
was. It
that's
was
a
like,
little guest house that a girlfriend of mine. It was so crazy the way that thing became a story. So we bought this very ramshackly house, and it has a guest house and a back house. And
okay,
so in the guest house, it was just like termites had eaten through some of the floors, whatever. Too much to try to tackle all at once. So I was just going to kind of like throw a carpet on there, put a couch in there, and for now, good enough. And my girlfriend said, "You should paint your floors. Like one way to deal
Mm,
with it is," and I was like, "Oh, I'd never even heard of that. Like,
yeah,
what?"
yeah,
So she said, "Oh, well, I do it if you want me to paint them for you." Because I was going to put in a new kitchen counter because the kitchen counter was so gross that it was one of
yes,
those things I was like, I
have to
can't
do
do
it,
that,
right.
and I can't have anybody over to my house. And she said, literally, for the price of putting in an inexpensive kitchen counter, you can buy all the paint and just paint your floors and just paint your counter. And I was like, "What are you talking about? How do you do that?" So she did it over a handful of weeks. She painted my floors, and she painted the stone counter, which was, by the way, it was camouflage. The guy
Mm.
who had a camouflage kitchen. So she painted that for me, and it turned out amazingly well. And so, but some people watching the process were like, "It's historic. Why would you do that?" It was
Oh,
so
no,
crazy.
no. I thought that one is I remember that one, and that one I thought was gorgeous. I actually thought it came out magnificently, and I didn't really understand what any of the brouhaha was about it because it
That's
just
pretty
looked
real.
so
Yeah,
cool. But I was
and
talking,
so much
yeah,
better than it was. I'm like,
yeah,
before
beautiful.
it was a weird brown and it had termite holes. We've covered up the termite holes with like wood, stuff
Yeah.
and painted it. It looks so much better.
But I was talking about uptown. There was something written about a house that you bought uptown.
Oh, we have an
And
apartment in Harlem.
right,
Yeah.
right. And it's looks gorgeous, and there was like a basketball court.
Oh,
And
yeah. Well, that's the person who owned it before me. We don't
correct.
have
That's what I
that.
thought. Okay, so this is what
And
I
all that furniture does not belong to me. And those are Warhols on the walls, and those
correct.
are not
Okay.
mine.
Wait,
So
wait, wait. So listen, so I
I'll
saw it
pass
and I was
along your compliments to him because he
right.
has
So I
a
didn't
lovely, lovely taste in art.
yeah.
But nope, I didn't get to keep any of that.
But I thought it was so cool. Like I just thought if I were gonna live in New York City, like that's the way to live in New York City. If you're gonna do
Yes,
it,
someone should give you some Warhols. Absolutely. I
you
fully
with
agree.
Warhols. I mean, they have to be your
Absolutely.
walls must be lined with Warhols.
Obviously. And a
Yes.
basketball court on your roof. No,
Yes.
my roof is under construction. It's just a complete disaster right now. There is nothing on the roof.
No basketball court.
Certainly not a basketball court, and not even any like flooring that you could walk on the roof.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Warhols were taken out when he sold
They
the
are
apartment.
gone. Yeah, you didn't buy those. What
Nope.
about how are the dogs in the city?
Dogs are great. What they did have, which is really why we bought this apartment to some degree, is that he had a dog run,
There we go.
which
That's
is
mhm,
amazing in
mhm.
Manhattan to have a dog run, and it's like a good little. So the dogs love it. It's really helpful, and they're pretty good. They like being outside. They like grass and whatever. They're very flexible. They kind of go wherever. And so, but they like the city. The challenge of New York City has such a rat problem.
Yeah.
Had it downtown in
Oh,
in Chelsea. We used to live in Chelsea,
yeah.
has it uptown. And so some of those rats are so bold, it scares my dogs. Like
Yeah.
we've met face to face with a rat, and the rats aren't afraid. They're bold.
I'm
So
afraid of them.
that
Yeah.
scares the dogs. But they have out in the country, you have like hedgehogs, and you have
Yeah.
you have other stuff. So
We used to have so we have 4 little dogs now, and actually my husband Keith, you know my husband because he was friends with your brother growing up. But when we have talked about leaving where we live now and moving, we took New York City off the table because of our dogs, because we've these 4 little
it's hard.
rescues. It's
It's
hard
hard.
unless you have back outdoor space like you have. And then and when we had a standard poodle, she used to go and kill small
Yeah.
animals and bring them to us as gifts.
Yeah.
So I don't know what would have happened to her with the
Yeah,
rats, but
you'd have a lot of rats in your living room. Yeah, no, it's hard. It's anything with dogs is very hard. And listen, I think I love living in New York City, but New York City is hard, right? And people love that it's hard because it's like,
Mhm.
it's hard and I'm making it. It's
Oh,
hard.
please.
I used to live in a fifth floor walk up and I'd be like, yes, I am. This
Yeah,
is hard. That someone else would say, I live in a sixth floor walk up. I
right.
live,
Of course.
but it's hard, and so I think with dogs, it really is even just getting up in the middle of the night, if you have to take them out,
That's
etcetera,
the
etcetera.
thing. That's exactly where it is. It's exactly that moment because there are plenty of nights with one of the 4 dogs, somebody doesn't feel well, and
Right,
one of us,
growing up,
usually
yeah,
me, ends up downstairs with the dog at the back door, able to go out and in, out and in,
right,
out and in because you can
right,
do it because 'cause I'm in a
right,
suburb.
right.
But I love how you guys are living. I think it's beautiful and amazing, and my god, how hard you have worked, and your husband has worked, and so why shouldn't you? Like, it's fantastic.
I love New York City. I really do.
Yeah,
I really, really love New York City. We tend to move to Florida in the winter because I don't like cold weather, and
yeah.
I like to ride. I'm not very good, but I like to ride.
Yeah, we have to talk about this because
I could talk about horses forever. Let me
no,
bore you more with a talk about horses, but
it's not
it's
boring.
just too cold in the winter. I used to
Yeah,
ride and you'd be in an indoor ring and with the snow and the ice, the sound coming off the roof was like Armageddon. It just sounded like the beginning of the end. It was so scary. Of course, the horses are flipping out.
of course.
And finally, a couple of years ago, I said to my husband, like, I just can't do that. I can't do winter
Yeah,
here. I just can't do it. It's too cold. I'm freezing.
yeah.
I don't like to be cold. And also, like, I feel like I'm risking my life every time I got on a horse when it's 35 degrees and everything is sliding off the roof. It's just too scary.
Yeah, and at our age, you also don't wanna get hurt. Like, I slipped down 2 steps last
Oof.
summer and broke 2 ribs and 3
Oh,
transverse processes, and, I mean, I'm so embarrassed that this was the fall that I took, but, like, I was horrified. Like, when I had to go and get the scans because I had broken all these bones, they were like, "What happened? Car accident? Like, what ha the impact must
oh,
have been," and I'm like, "Jackass in her kitchen, no treads on the
oh
sock,
gosh. No,
fat fault
that's the
legs up in."
problem today, right?
It's
It's just right. You don't have that's kind of my thinking. Like, I don't have the ability to just
no,
take a tumble off a
not
horse.
anymore.
It's just not gonna happen, and they're all even if your own horse isn't freaking out, somebody else's horse in the ring is freaking out, and so it just feels like I used to ride, like, taking my life into my hands, and I said, "You know what? I'm just not doing that anymore."
Yeah, you do it because you love it, and you do it in a way
I do.
that's safe. So, this is the Soledad that I'm kind of obsessed with right now. It's no, I'm serious, like,
The only
look,
one, yes.
I've watched you forever, and you've always been an incredible journalist, and you know how to tell a story, whether it's because you have produced the project or you executive produced the Rebellious Mrs. Rosa Parks, which is fan freaking
Oh,
tastic.
thank you, it's a good doc, yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good because I mean, I am an East Coast Jew, right? So, like, I grew up learning things. Like, it was not out of I went to Friends Academy, I went to a Quaker school where we had a pretty full curriculum. I mean, Nassau County is as disgusting as you could get in terms of race, but, like, I didn't go to the public school system, so I thankfully was taught, but not what I learned from this documentary.
Crazy, right? I mean, I have done a bunch of
Crazy.
documentaries about civil rights leader. Like I was like, I know a lot about Rosa Parks. And then it really turned out. I mean, the book, we did our doc
Yeah,
off of the book by the same name, which is
yeah,
written by a professor, a woman named Jean Theo Harris. And it's just the book is so great. Our biggest challenge really was how do you turn the book into a doc? Because there's
mhm,
so much there.
mhm.
It's just overwhelming. And so I think we had two great directors, Yuri Barichin and Johanna Hamilton, were our directors on the project, and they were excellent because they really had to wrestle with so what stays in and what doesn't in the doc part of it. How do you tell the story of Rosa Parks? How do you tell the story of a person everybody thinks they know?
Yeah.
Even when they were pitching the project originally, I was kind of like, oh, I think someone's done a doc already. Let me just Google this and make sure. But even that surprised me. So yeah, it's a really good doc, and I think it's really surprising to people all that they didn't know about Rosa Parks.
Yeah, because she's painted the picture of her is this person who is sort of diminutive
Mm,
and not really the civil rights activist that she was really from the jump. I mean, she
yeah,
was freaking brave. Like,
yeah,
wow. And the fact
yeah.
that how everything was orchestrated when she was arrested and
Yeah,
people not getting on the
The
yeah.
New York Times, when she died, called her, the accidental matriarch of the civil rights movement, and I
This was
remember thinking,
yeah,
nothing accidental about
nothing.
Rosa Parks was a lot of things, she was not accidental at all. She was
Yeah,
very, very intentional in everything she did, and did it for a long time. She
yeah,
didn't dip in and dip out. I think people really only know about the Montgomery bus boycott, and they
right.
think of her impact as, like, from here to here, when
Yeah,
actually, as you say, she, as a child, really understood injustice and unfairness, and then sort of pushed back and fought against it for her entire life. When she
yeah,
left, I mean, she couldn't work in Montgomery after the boycott. She was, I always thought after the boycott, people got back on the buses and everything went back to normal, except that, the discrimination in that front kind of ended. But that wasn't the case at all. She never worked again. She was
right.
never able to get a job. Her husband was never able to get a job. And it's one of the reasons they left Montgomery for Detroit. They went to see family members in Detroit. They moved up north. And I think, she then had an entire other life of both service and also activism in Detroit. So
Mhm.
thinking of her in this very tiny window of the Montgomery bus boycott is just gets it wrong.
Totally wrong because there is, as you just said, a real before and a real after where she was completely involved.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I loved it. I just thought it was just how do you pick a project? How do you because I feel like you you do so many things, which is why we're gonna get to the horses soon. Like you
I'm dying for a horse project. Someone brings me a horse project. Really, a lot of it is this something we could do well? The fun
Mhm.
thing I think about getting older and running your own company is there's some things that I'm not the one to do it, and I'll just say, like, we might not be the ones to do it. There's another person or another platform that you should go to.
Mhm.
Um, so we really is it interesting? I think sometimes some of our projects that we've greenlit have been, we know we can sell them and we think they're really, really compelling. I have a producer working on a doc right now that's a fascinating doc, and he was just so passionate about it, and it was so interesting that we gave him the green light to go just work on it. So it really just has to be really personally interesting to us, or our producers, and it makes sense. And that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean it has to be about civil rights or Black
Sure.
people. It has to be like,
Yeah.
are we interested, and do we think we can tell this story well?
Yeah, but I think that yeah, I mean, I think for you to pick projects that just mean something to you, whether it's because it involves Black people or not, I think is the point. Like, it's
Yeah.
gotta resonate with you on some level for you to feel like you wanna get involved in. It's a big
Right. And
project.
and feel like you can then deliver it
Yeah,
well.
for sure. And then you host Matter of Fact,
Yeah.
so you're also doing that.
Well, the matter of fact is just your classic. I mean, it's a public affairs show. We're
Mhm.
now the number one public affairs national public affairs show.
Incredible.
Crazy. But when I started, I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want to anchor. I just couldn't go back into it. And because it's one day a week, it's on the weekend, it really, I thought, was a perfect amount of time to be able to keep my finger in, my toe kind of in the genre of anchoring news
Yeah.
without necessarily, doing the grind of early morning, all day, every
Yeah.
day, back to back to back. So I
Yeah.
really loved it for that. I love that it's not really a political show, it's more a show about policy. It's like a
Mhm.
public policy show, which is
Mhm.
more interesting to me because we don't have people yelling at each other. It's not this politician versus that politician, which I very much like. It's more how policy impacts people, which means we get to center people in our stories, which I really like. So I've really enjoyed. We're in our 8th season and it's been going very well. So it's been really, really great. And then I get to be a correspondent for Real Sports, which again is I mean, it's
Incredible.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
And I think what I love about that show is, as much as it's about sports, it's not about sports, right? It's
Right.
about, you absolutely do not need to understand how a game is scored or the history of how that game came to be played in the United States to understand anything about a story we're going to do, because it really, again, centers people and their journey and their struggle and their success, within the context of sports. So that's been an amazing show. So it's nice to be able to kind of pick and choose and decide those things that you want to do and the people you want to work with.
I still, no matter what I do, I can't understand football. I cannot. And so Super Bowl just happened, and I was determining who I wanted to win. First, I asked my husband because I'm a 1950s wife, who are we rooting for? And then He didn't really have a dog in the fight, by the way. The Giants weren't playing.
I was
He
gonna
was
say
like,
it's a little hard when you don't, you're not haven't been rooting for either of the teams.
correct, which is exactly how he felt. But then when I saw like the Philly coach started crying during the national anthem, I was like, oh crap, now I want that team because he has feelings,
Yes,
right?
right?
And I love that Shirley Ralph sang at the beginning, like because
Wasn't
I'm
it great?
so crazy for her too, and
And that outfit,
I
her
mean,
dress alone, or I think it's like a pantsuit or something, it was fabulous. I guess her
also, yeah,
daughter
yeah.
styled her because her
Oh
daughter
wow.
was tweeting about who the designer was, and it was amazing.
Also, don't you think about Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit when she says singing's not gonna pay the bills? I
Yep.
think singing's paying the bills. Like,
Right,
I was
right,
fully like, because I've got to talk to her once before, and it cracks me up that that's the character that she put, that's one of my
right.
very favorite movies. But by the end, I was happy Mahomes won, right? So you're right that sports, you don't really have to care about the actual
My
game.
husband had really good advice around sports, which I like. We have 4 kids who are
Yeah.
2 are in college, 2 are in high school, and he always wanted them to like, root for the home team. Like, he loved the idea of just, like, love the team where you are, and
Mhm.
just not only because you love the team, but also just because I think it creates community, and it's being part of a thing in your own neighborhood. So,
Yeah.
I've sort of, believed that even when, whatever sport it is, right? So, he's a big lacrosse player, so we used to go to Hofstra to watch,
Uh-huh.
trying to remember the name of that team.
I don't
Oh,
know.
the
I mean, I went to Hofstra
Lizards
Law
or
School,
something.
and I have 0 clue.
But if this is like they were the the PLL lacrosse league
Wow.
had a Long Island team named the something Lizards maybe, but
Okay,
I mean, I
maybe.
used to take all the
Yeah.
boys for their birthday parties there. I mean, it just was fun to go
Yeah.
and watch, like, the local team play, and they
Yeah.
just loved it. So I've always thought that that was really good advice. Like, root for your home team. Be a person who cheers for the home team.
I was watching a recent Matter of Fact where you were talking about education versus learning a trade, that
Mm,
college isn't for everyone, and I immediately thought about you, and you're so highly educated, right? And you were raised in a home where education was so, and we've talked about this before, and you've talked about it at length, no TVs, a lot of learning, a lot of reading. You went to
boring, boring,
it
boring.
right, you went to Harvard, you're smart, you were a brilliant girl, and, like, I mean, I'm sure your kids, you said your kids are 2 are in college and 2 are just, are at that age where they're going to college, or they're the
They're in high
boys?
school. They got a
Yeah.
couple more years. Yeah, the
Okay.
boys.
Yeah. What do you think about that when you think about a trade versus is there any part of you that would be cool if the boys
Oh,
didn't go to college, but the girls
100%.
are in college? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you know why? Because I think college debt is so high, and my
Yeah.
husband and I run this foundation. We send girls to college, and
Yeah.
it is so expensive, and I think for so many young people, especially for those who don't exactly know what they wanna do, right? They'll
Yep.
say, "Well, I like working with people," or "I like working with my hands," or
Yep.
I like being able to organize things." Well, I mean, that's how I was in college, like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just kind of thought, like, "This is what I think I'm
Mhm.
good at in this
Mhm.
arena." So, I actually thought that the argument is very persuasive. The man I was interviewing sort of does college, uh, counseling around careers and, around, trade careers. And he was saying, like, "Listen, you could be 23 years old and making $80,000 a year and have 0 college debt." I thought that
Right.
was pretty amazing. I thought
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have changed. I used to think my kids would both end up in graduate school
Mm.
just because it was what I did, and
Mhm.
then one of them is in law school, the other one graduated college. She's incredible, right? Like you're saying, like, she works, she's into what she's doing, she's gonna figure out what her life will be like, and I'm so happy for her that
Yeah.
that's like
I think it's about passion, honestly.
yeah.
I think I would much rather have a kid who's passionate about whatever than a
Yes.
child who's slogging through a thing that they clearly hate.
Yes.
I mean, like, if you hate law school, you shouldn't go, and you should figure
Right.
out, "What am I passionate about? What would I be good at?" Because that's the work you're gonna be doing for your entire life. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, a lot of TV news writing, certainly, when I started, was very much like an apprenticeship, right? You get in and you kinda learn the gig, and so, it is crazy to me the amount of debt that some people take on for jobs where they really will never make enough money to pay back that debt and pay
That's
back
right.
all the interest on the debt. So I actually thought, it was very good advice and also saying, you can make good money. Like, this is
Oh,
real.
yeah.
You can buy a house, you can raise a
Great money.
family,
Yeah.
versus this idea of like, well, go into the trade and you'll never really make it, but at least you'll have a job. Like, I don't think that's a good argument. There was a study that found that for Gen Zers, they wanted financial stability, right? They
Mhm.
didn't want, the market this, the market that. They're hired, they're fired, they're hired, they're fired. They wanted to be entrepreneurial, and they also wanted, what was the third thing? I'm trying to remember the third thing they were interested. They wanted to be entrepreneurial. Oh, and they wanted to feel like they had a mission in life. And I thought
Mm.
that was so cool because, right, that's what people want out of work. You want to feel like
Yeah.
every day I get up and I go into a thing that
Purpose.
matters.
Yeah.
And the guy I was interviewing is like, yeah, and the mission in life is to make America better. If you're out there building buildings, and it's true, I've never met a carpenter or contractor who hasn't driven you by something and said, I'm the one who did that.
It's
See
the
that building
coolest.
up there? I did that.
Oh,
I
it's so
built it.
cool.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah.
and of course, financial stability. I mean, clearly the whole point of our interview was that there's 650,000 job openings. And then entrepreneurship, take all your skills and create a business. And suddenly you're running something. Yes, you're a plumber, but you're actually the head plumber, and you're the head of the business, and you're hiring 10 other plumbers, and you're really building a business and building value. So it was a very interesting discussion. So yeah, no, I'd never have a problem at all if as long as my kids were doing something they were passionate about. I always feel badly for people who are just, it's so miserable having to slog through something. Mm.
It is really so miserable having to slog through something, and I guess also with you watching you do the work that you've done, it has never really looked like you've slogged through anything. Like, you do have
I
this.
always loved it. I mean, I really was lucky because I was pre-med in college, but I really was lucky because I found something that I loved, and I loved I used to, my job was to get coffee for people. I loved that. I
Yeah.
thought it was great. My
So
job
do I.
was to transcribe, interviews. I
Yeah.
loved it. It was kind of boring sometimes, but it was really, you felt like you were part of this team. So I was lucky because I really, really enjoyed even most of like the scut work, the stuff that you don't want to do. I really loved the field from the get-go. And I think I wouldn't have really done well in medicine. I think it would have been something that I'd be frustrated and unhappy and unfulfilled. So I feel very fortunate that I figured that out early on.
I also feel like now, as a reporter or journalist, like years ago, you couldn't really have an opinion. That was sort of the thing, that people who were in journalism or reporters were supposed to stay a little bit neutral. I love that you speak out. Like, I
Well, I
love your.
think they always did have an opinion. I mean, the thing that's so weird is if you said, okay, I want you to go do a story on, I don't know, something, whatever. Like, do you actually have to research it? You have to go in with some kind of
You
point of
have
view.
to.
Now,
Right.
during the process, you might say, I went in thinking this, but boy, I'm really convinced. I've
Not with
interviewed
that.
all these interesting people who've
Yeah.
changed my mind. But
Yeah.
the people who don't have any opinion at all, first of all, either they're lying to you or they're just incredibly uneducated
I
and
was I was
uninterested.
gonna say dumb, but
Yeah,
that's wrong. But it
so I
feels that
think,
way. Yeah.
yeah, so I really, I don't, to me, it's like, I think it's just about not putting yourself in the center of the story. You should have an opinion. If someone is lying to you, you should be pissed off. You should be clear to everybody, this is a lie. What you're saying is a lie. And so I think my frustration is, I mean, I don't think my opinion on abortion rights, my opinion on what the minimum wage should be.
Mhm.
My opinion, like, I mean, I don't think anybody should care like what I think about it. I'm not an expert, certainly. And if I'm reporting on it, I'm going to interview experts. But absolutely, I think my job is to make sure people understand the credibility or the lack of
By the way,
credibility.
that's fair. Yes, and you're
Right.
right,
So,
especially now.
I mean, but yeah, so I've really tried in my reporting to make sure that I'm the one who's knee deep in it. My job is to explain what I'm seeing. Sometimes people say, just report and don't give any other information. I'm like, but you should have context, right? If I tell you, oh my gosh, um, a million people died from Spanish flu, COVID was worse than that. Like, you need to know comparisons. You need to know context. You need to understand why,
Right,
what was happening.
right.
So I think reporters' jobs are that. It's all about context and this idea that somehow, well, if you know a community, a good example. When we would do Black in America documentaries,
Mhm.
in all these Black neighborhoods, their relationship with police is very, very different than most majority white neighborhoods. And so sometimes you get pushback from your editors. They'd be like, no, the police are really good. You're like, really? They're not in
Oh
this
my
neighborhood.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I get it. Like, their point of view is police is good. This is how it is. I love the officers. I teach my kids to run to officer friendly, to ask for help. And it's like, I get it. That's your personal experience, but that is not the experience where I am. When we covered Hurricane Katrina, I remember people would ask, well, why did people not leave? Right? They wanted to understand the context. Were they just stupid? There's a hurricane coming and they just didn't want to go? Were they just arrogant about it? Were they naive? Well, a lot of times they just didn't have the money. What are you going to do? Leave for an unending number of days?
Right.
Or they don't have a vehicle, or all their relatives live in the next block. So, the
Right.
idea of like leaving town to go see your relatives, there is no place to go. And I
Of
think
course.
once we could provide that context, people began to understand better. Like, oh, I get it. I didn't realize that in New Orleans, especially in Louisiana as a whole, right? Everybody's relatives might live right there. So where are you going?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that's kind of the job, would be my take on that.
Yeah, but also I think that the context, and I would imagine, and you could tell me how frustrating is it when you do give context, you do give accurate information, and there's still people who want to believe things that are just completely untrue.
Well,
Like,
I mean, again, I don't think, like, that's not my problem. That's their problem. There was a person who was tweeting about the number of, the rising number of athletes with cardiac issues.
oh, come on now.
And I'm like, well, just did a story on that. Real Sports. It's airing right now. You can check it out. And actually, the people who track that have not found that. Right? There is
Right.
no, I would say, mid-COVID. Let's call ourselves post-COVID-ish right
Yeah.
now, or I don't know. But they have said there is no rise in these young. The number one killer of high school athletes is dying by some kind of cardiac issue, and has been for a long
It's
time.
not about the vaccine. Like, people
Not at
want to
all.
make
It didn't
correct.
start
Yeah,
2 years ago. It is
that's right.
literally been
Mm,
tracked for a long time. I mean, that's
right.
what our story was about. So to me, I think answering those folks is important, bluntly, plainly, but also, I mean, I hope people read it and understand that Real Sports probably knows more than the dude who's tweeting
How
about it.
about, yeah, definitely knows more, and most people will tweet those kinds of things because they see it somewhere without knowing what the source is, and then they just repeat it. They regurgitate it because they want it to be that's what they want it to be. They
Yeah,
want to believe that story. That story
absolutely.
somehow makes them feel
Absolutely.
better than the truth
Absolutely.
that this happens,
Yep,
unfortunately, when it
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. But, I mean, my job, I think, is to just make sure you're doing well-researched, good quality,
Yeah.
serious work, which is why I don't like when we platform people who are liars, right? It's sort of,
Yeah,
I think it's
right.
confusing to people. I think it's, and sometimes people do that and they say, but I'm going to call them out on the air. You're like, right, but you're actually just giving them a platform.
Right.
So I don't think it's such a good,
And isn't that the whole, like, confirmation bias thing? Like, if you give them a platform and then people hear it and see it, even if you've denounced it, they're still believing
and
it.
often the denouncing is not very good
Right.
or very
In the
strong.
moment
So
on the
it's not
TV. Right.
super, right. It's not super well denounced.
Yeah. You had, tweeted the other day about woke being a word for Black. I had
Yeah, well, I mean,
no
I think it was after the Super Bowl, right? Marjorie
y
Taylor Greene
what a great gal. Yeah.
was sort of saying
Ugh.
something like she liked one of the singers, the white guy who did the national anthem. I thought he was terrific, actually. What a beautiful voice. And she said everything else that was woke, right? So
Oh,
I think these
seriously.
days
Yeah.
we used to, woke used to be. I mean, woke's been around for a long time. Woke was a word that was, I think, back in the 1940s, people talked about being woke, meaning being aware
Sure.
and awake to
Yeah.
usually some kind of injustice. But of
Yeah.
course, today, woke often is just synonymous with black, or synonymous, almost like with the N word, right? It's that's what they're really talking about. So, or anything you don't like, people will talk about if someone's a vegan, well, they're woke versus just like they're a vegan. And so I think it's used very sarcastically, right? She wasn't saying woke. She was saying she didn't like the Black national anthem. She didn't like Rihanna, I guess.
Which how could you not? But go on. Yeah.
So I think it's very I think often reporters, the New York Times uses the word woke a lot, right? Almost in a little snarky little tone. And I think it's a mistake because I want people to recognize, just know when you're using the word, when you repeat the word woke, sarcastically, what you're really saying is the N word. So be very confident and very careful. Is that what you really want to be saying? Are
Right.
you sure you want to be saying that? Because
Yeah.
that's being read and that is really what you're saying. And everybody knows that's what you're saying. All the Black people in the room are
If
well
that's
aware
correct, right?
that's
Because
what you're
I mean,
saying.
I've kind of been of the ilk of if you use woke, if you talk about how woke you are, you're probably not all that woke. Like, so
Yeah,
that's the way
exactly.
I
And
would.
nowadays it's really done sarcastically, right? It's like
Right.
very, so it has nothing to do with, I don't know how this idea of like being aware of injustice, which I think is kind of a good thing generally,
Yeah.
somehow is a bad thing. But that's where we are today. But when anybody can use whatever they want, but when the media starts repeating these things and
Right.
allows people to call something woke without actually saying, well, what does that mean exactly? And so, are you saying that you support injustice? Is that what you're saying? Like there are ways to do interviews
Yeah.
that hold people accountable. And usually I have found, especially white reporters, because the Black reporters will tell you, I know exactly what someone is saying to my face when they laugh about something being woke. I get it. They are using the N word without using the N word.
Ugh.
Yeah, we get it. They get it. And this is often your colleagues, right? Like they get it.
Ugh.
So I think the reporters who have the opportunity to press people on what they mean, and they often will fail on that.
Yeah. I guess because look, it's become much more, I mean, it's weird. It's actually weird how people now speak in those kind of ways. Like that Marjorie Taylor Greene can speak like that. And we can read between the lines, know what her intention is. And it's almost like, oh, that's okay. It's not okay. But we become this culture
Yeah, I think
where,
it
like you
becomes
said, colleagues, it's,
desensitized to it.
yeah, which it's, I don't know. It's maddening to me. Actually, I
Yeah.
do know it's maddening. Like when you think back to the civil rights movement, not being that long ago, that this is still happening. I don't even, I mean,
It's where we are today.
I know, right, where we are today. But yeah, I mean, I imagine for you, I mean, and it's just scary, upsetting, and awful. And I know your kids are biracial, and so your sons are biracial. How is that for you? And you're biracial. Like, do you worry about them? Like, how does that?
I think one thing that gives me a lot of hope is that I
Yeah.
think young people, we actually saw this in our Rosa Parks documentary. One of the big sort of reveals, right, is that Rosa Parks loved Dr. King and loved Malcolm X and loved the Black
Yes.
Panthers, right? And I think
Yes.
it'd be very easy to be like, wait, you have to pick a side, right? Either you're with Malcolm or you're with
Yeah.
Martin, but you
Yeah.
can't be. But I
Yeah.
actually find like young people can hold that in their heads.
Sure.
So it's been kind of remarkable to me when I was growing up, mixed race, like it was a thing,
Yeah.
and then my niece was living with us briefly and we were living in New York City and it was just not a thing anymore. It
Mhm.
was much less of a thing. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, I just think it's becoming less in certain areas,
Yeah.
obviously. It's becoming
Yes. Well, that's a thing where right. It's a weird, when you live in a certainly in Manhattan.
yeah, but you know what? I'd say around the country, every place I travel to, the number of interracial marriages or relationships way up. I mean, you just
Yeah.
see. So, I think it's less of a thing. So I think young people actually, when I was growing up, there was just a lot of like, well, what are you? And I don't
Mhm.
think that's the case as much today
I
because I
think you're
think
right
people
about that.
understand, like they get it. And that's
Yes.
because there's been more conversations, right? No one talked about someone being biracial. I don't think I ever said, oh, I'm biracial when I was ninth grade or eighth grade or 10 years old, or I'm mixed race. But now I think those conversations are pretty typical. I had a girl, my niece lived with us, very light skinned Black girl. And, and I think she was a little anxious about going to the school. And and I was like, well, one of the boys in the school is half Swedish and half Vietnamese.
Mhm.
And he's this giant red-headed Asian.
Amazing.
I mean, and it was just like,
Awesome.
you're not even an interesting mix of people.
Right.
This great,
Right.
I think was actually in her class or one of our kids' class, so it was just not atypical.
But
It was just
I know what you mean. I think you're right because I do think at our generation, yes, definitely knew much more, like was more aware of of everything in a different way from now. I mean, obviously, I hate when people are like, "I don't know what someone looks like. I don't see this. I don't see," like, you see someone, you know what they look like,
There's a little
obviously.
different way of saying that, which I think
Yeah.
is interesting. I've had a number of kids will describe a friend to me, right? And they're talking
Yeah.
about, and then you meet the kid, you're like, "Oh, he's black." Like, they just never mentioned it, which would have
Yeah.
been, back in the day, I would have been like, "Oh, my friend, he's black and da da
Yeah.
da." They'll describe, he's got brown hair. He's the kid,
Yeah.
mom, who lives under.
Yeah.
You're like, "Gosh, I don't know who," and then you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh," and
Yeah.
that has always surprised me. Like, it's not the number one
No.
defining characteristic. When I was growing up, it was like that
Same.
would absolutely be. Now, this is all anecdotal. I do not have any evidence to back it up, but I think that just young people today and the number of interracial relationships, marriages, whatever,
Yeah.
um, is grown
Yeah.
dramatically. So I think they just manage that better. It's not
Yes.
so unusual.
Yes, I agree with you, but that's funny what you just said because that's what exactly the story you just said. I mean, that happened to me in college when I was like 20, and I remember it because in recent years I've thought back on it and thinking back on it, been like, why did I care that my friend didn't tell me that the person I was meeting was of Indian descent? Like, why? But she had not mentioned it in the description of the person's apartment I was going to. It just she described everything else. And I was just like, "Oh, you just never said it." Like, it was just I didn't care, but now I would never think like that. Like, it's a different I don't know, but that was our generation. That was at 20 years old. We're similarly aged, like fine wines, that
Yeah,
we that it was just
exactly.
yeah, but it's much in that I think the young people, I think you're right. If we can hang our hats on hope or something,
Yeah.
it's today's youth or some of them. You have described yourself as being a super positive person. Is there anything that can really knock you down, like make you have
Yeah,
it
this,
pause?
I think, again, it comes back often to these videotapes of police
Ugh,
brutality, are just heartbreaking and
heartbreaking.
stressful. I used to really retweet them and pass them. I thought they were so important to share, and I've started second guessing that because I do think it's upsetting to people,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I'm very conflicted about it because I do think sharing is important. I think people have to know. So I'm sort of torn on that one.
Mhm.
Um, but, yeah, I'm sort of nauseatingly optimistic, so
Yeah.
I'm definitely one of those, like, those what's the little dolls that you punch them and they kinda pop back up?
Yeah, no, I
I'm a
think
little
that's a
bit like
great
that, like, I'm
quality.
punching,
Yeah.
but I pop right back up.
Like a weeble? Weebles wobble,
Exactly.
but we don't fall down. I call myself a weeble, but I'm not positive. I'm a weeble because I can't be knocked, like, I refuse. Like, I can be depressed, down, dark, but I never give up ever. Like, I won't go down, I'll just continue to fight. Like, that's how I'm wired,
Right,
but it's I
right.
don't and maybe there is a seed of optimism in there. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think there is. I think there
Yeah,
is.
maybe. I need a day in the life and how you got the whole horse thing because
Oh my gosh, well,
one
I
of
grew
your
up in Long
daughters
Island.
does
Yeah,
your
so
daughter
I
ride
did.
too, one of them?
Both
They
used to,
both
and
do,
actually one of
okay.
my boys too.
I
Sophia
love that.
rides, and she
Mhm.
actually was here in Florida showing this weekend. Yeah, so I rode as a kid when I was about 13. I used to have muck stalls and to pay for my lessons, and I loved it. I was never very good. I never got very far, but I knew as a grown up I wanted to ride. So once my kids were 4 and 5, I started them in lessons so that I could ride too, which was a really good strategy, although they went on to become excellent riders, and I
Mhm.
was still always kind of mediocre. And so one really stuck with it. The other one went on to play other sports,
Mhm.
and she loves it. It's so much fun. It's just such a great sport. I love it so much. I love horses. I love animals,
Me too.
and I really and it takes a lot to to become an
It's
expert.
hard.
It is hard. It's a very hard sport, but it's a lot of fun. So I've really enjoyed it.
And it doesn't hurt your tailbone?
No, it really hurts I mean, when you start off, your muscles are killing you,
Everything, right?
like your
Inner
leg
thigh.
muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your tailbone's hurting, you're probably landing, like, banging too hard,
Yeah.
and so it's probably you're just kinda doing it wrong because it shouldn't be super uncomfortable in your tailbone.
How many days a week do you ride?
Here in Florida, 5 days a week, usually.
Man, I
I try to
love
ride 5
that.
days a week. I try to ride every day, but Monday, the barns are closed,
Yeah.
and Wednesday, I'm shooting my show.
I love this because it's sort of like part of your lifeline in a
Love
way.
it, love it.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
it
it
keeps your sanity. You know what I love about horseback riding? You can't do anything else. You can't make a
Mhm.
list. You can't be fretting about something. You will die if you are thinking of anything else other than what you're doing in that moment on your horse. And
Wow.
that I find very relaxing. It forces you to take your mind off anything else and to really focus on the work at hand and trying to like think about your horse and getting your horse to move the right way and getting yourself to move the right way. It's really challenging. It's very physically, can be very physically hard, and it's a ton of fun.
I think it's almost like active meditation in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big fan of that. I don't love the whole quiet meditate. I get it. It's great for people it works for, so I'm not poo-pooing other people's process, but, like, I can't sit in that.
Right.
I can't.
Same.
Like,
I sit there and make lists. I'm always like,
lists.
I'll
Oh my
start doing like,
god.
"Oh, shoot, I gotta pick up bread. Oh,
Yes.
bread, but I should get cheese too." And then by the
Yes.
end of my meditation, I'll make bread, cheese, yogurt,
Yes.
coffee. Bread, cheese, yogurt,
The whole
coffee.
thing, and by the way, when I say it out loud, I feel like I've now committed it a little bit to memory,
Yes, it's
and
totally
yeah, like, I'll have to like, exercise, that's why I like exercise as a form of
mm,
meditation because it's that
yep,
same kind of when you're physical,
yep,
you have to do that thing because if you'll get hurt otherwise.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's so how many horses do you have for you that you
I
ride
ride 2.
consistently?
I have a
Mhm.
horse, that was so there's a bunch of different kinds of sports. So I
Yeah.
have there's jumpers and there's
Mhm.
hunters. So I have a jumper and I have a hunter. So a jumper is used basically for speed to go around the high jumps, and the hunters tend to be more of sort of slow, and they're looking at the shape and the
Yeah.
form of the rider and the horse.
How important do you think it is for you to do the things that you love to do for your kids to see it, for your girls to see it? Sort of
I
you
think it's I think it's important. I think it's important for your boys to see it, right?
Yeah.
Like in our family, we used to always say, like, everybody gets to be happy. I do not want any martyrs, you know.
Yeah.
People, and we'll have to figure it out, but nobody has to be a martyr for the cause, and certainly not me. I've never wanted to be one of those like, okay, fine, I guess I won't do what I want to do. I don't want
No.
to be that kind of mom. I think everybody, we try to work it out. We try
Mhm.
to juggle a zillion different schedules,
Mhm.
and if there's something that you're passionate about and something that you love, I mean, I think you can't have 10 passions, but you can have one. and and then we try to bend over backward to make sure that everybody gets to what they're trying to get to.
I think that's what have pretty much felt about working, that even and I know that some people have to work when they don't want to work and they want to be home and they don't want as women don't wanna have want to work, but I found, it's better for us being in a dual income home, so there was that was a good thing, but I found that having a job and having something to do kept me from really driving my kids insane, and I thought
Yeah.
and yes, a good example for my son and for my daughter to
Yeah,
see
I
that
mean, I
yeah,
think, again, I think embodying a person who's trying to be fulfilled is a good thing,
yeah,
and trying to be fulfilled by doing work that's meaningful and matters to you and makes you happy and challenges you and sometimes probably frustrates you, but, like, I think that process is a very good thing for kids to see.
yeah. The documentary, by the way, is on Peacock. I didn't
Yeah,
mention that before, so you guys can stream it right now, and it's so worth your while. It is so good. Is there
yeah,
anything
me
that
too.
you want to do or a person you wanna interview or a subject you wanna tackle that you haven't yet?
Gosh, no, not really. I like tackling the stories, that matter. The story I would love to just be I'm happy to be an assistant producer on it or a
Mhm.
junior producer, or just get coffee when they do the George Santos story.
Yeah. I
When
mean,
Netflix pulls that one off, that
like,
one would be amazing because that's good. That is just day in, day out, such a mess
it's
that
wild.
when someone pulls it
Yeah.
together, it's gonna be absolutely mind-blowing.
I wish someone could fully explain it to me. I mean, was telling you before I have a
It's
kid
too early. It's too no,
yeah.
everything's not in yet. People do not know, but it's gonna be amazing. I just can tell. It's
But
gonna be
how is
amazing.
our system, eh, like, made this way that he can still hold the position he holds? He's
Well, I
long
mean, I think because you have to then they gotta find wrongdoing.
right. Ugh,
Then, it's gotta be a way to replace people, right?
yeah.
And so someone has to say, "We actually am not gonna seat him," but the Republicans in Congress haven't said that, so there's a process. So it'll be interesting to see really what happens with
I
him.
mean, I feel like there's not a person who's sort of come out and been like, "No, it's all true. He's good. You guys
Oh,
are
no,
just
it's it
wrong."
just
Like, there's
makes
not
it
one.
so and no one is gonna
Not one.
defend that because
It's amazing.
it
Not
is gonna
one.
be such a great six-part Netflix docuseries when that happens, let me tell you.
He's gotta
Can't
be
wait.
there's gotta be some mental illness
Cannot
in this
wait.
because there has to be, because from all the different lies that sort of span all different areas of life, I mean, I mean, we got into
And
dog rescue.
wait.
Right. Stealing money from the dogs and the
Oh, that's
veterans
such a
who need,
sad
like,
story, right?
how is
Cannot
that,
wait,
like, how could you do that? Who I mean, yeah, no, it's gonna be, you're right. This will be epic, and
cannot
I
wait.
think you should be getting people coffee.
Yeah, I will,
I
happily. I
think
just sit there and listen in.
let
That's
me just
that's what I
let
wanna
me
do.
just go and do this. Soledad O'Brien, you are really, dynamic, interesting. I love that you still do all the things that you're doing. Like, I am hoping that you're still interviewing people, like, well into your 80s. Like, you need to, there's no retiring for you.
That's the plan. That is the plan. I love
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. You should follow Soledad at Soledad O'Brien on Twitter, on Instagram. On Twitter, as I said before, I didn't say it, I was talking just about the woke thing, but you're also unafraid on Twitter. And I love how you
Thank
just
you.
call everybody out. Like, it's just
Thank you,
great.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, because we're pretty aligned politically or whatever. So, like, when I see, or
I hate
yeah,
bullshit. To me,
so do
it's
I.
like, just be a good person. Don't
Right.
bullshit people. It's not
Right.
so hard.
It isn't so hard, but it isn't, and it shouldn't be. But for some, it is. So I don't. It's
The George
yeah.
Santos story,
The
let me tell
George
you.
coming to you soon, and the fact that it's Long Island is just Suffolk, you and my husband, there you go. Yeah, Suffolk County,
There's
well
reason
done.
for
I
that.
know, it's really scary. Thank you for being on my
It was my
podcast.
pleasure. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
you guys, you can, follow me on Instagram at Just Jenny Hutt, on TikTok, I'm at Jenny Hutt, and Twitter, Jenny Hutt. Any questions or comments about today's episode, email justjennypod@gmail.com, and I will be back here again, per usual, tomorrow. Thank you, Soledad. Yeah,
Thanks for
you're
having